Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOOnline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. Hello and welcome to Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette, and as we do every Thursday, we're joined by a brand new guest talking about their life and their journey throughout the world of martial arts. My guest today is an author, a teacher, a mother, a fifth-degree martial arts master. She has a bachelor's degree in social sciences and communication and a master's degree in education. She taught 5th and 6th grade special education for 10 years. Her and her husband, who's an 8th dan Grandmaster, together with their 3 children, own and run a martial arts studio, The Martial Way, in Southern California. They empower their community through the teachings of taekwondo and hapkido. Her vision is a world where all people are safe and respected, and her mission is to empower women to feel and be safe, strong, and able to defend themselves. Her life experience, paired with over 30 years of martial arts training, helps her take others from a feeling of insecurity to one of personal strength. Please welcome my guest today, Jodi Harrison Lee. How are you doing today, Jodi?
Hi. Hey, Brian. Thanks for having me on your show.
No, I appreciate it. I'm glad you were able to make it work out. And what we like to do with all my guests, I want to go back to the very beginning. I want to know kind of where that first spark of martial arts came from. What led to your first interest?
Okay. That was in college. I kind of struggled because I was a big time athlete growing up. It was my identity, really.
Mm-hmm.
And then after my first 4 years of college, I realized that something was missing. So I kind of was searching for another sport to do that would kind of fill that need, because just working out in a gym wasn't doing it for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a flyer in the mail. I was about 22, 23 years old. And it looked interesting. It was to go to a local studio. And so I went to check it out, and I just happened to show up during the black belt class, and it was like high degree masters, and there was one woman in the class. And I just sat watching it, just thinking, wow, that's like super cool. And it seemed perfect because it had a goal. You know, it wasn't just working out for working out purposes, but it had a goal, and it was it. I signed up on the spot, and I've never looked back.
Wow. So before that, did you know anything about martial arts? I mean, did you watch any martial arts movies growing up, or was it in your thoughts at all?
Well, that's funny because I have looked back to think about that. And, I grew up in a small town. Well, I mean, it's in LA, but the town itself didn't have a lot of stuff.
Okay.
And I never saw or noticed a martial arts studio growing up, but I knew that martial arts existed, obviously. I mean, I'm Karate Kid era, right? So for sure I watched Karate Kid and other martial arts movies, but it seemed like something that other people did. I did traditional sports like tennis and basketball and baseball. That's what I grew up doing, and plenty of other sports, but pretty mainstream sports. And it never dawned on me, actually, or, that was something I could do. And and it just wasn't brought to my attention. My dad was a big athlete, and he taught me all these sports, and that was just not one of the choices.
Nice. Okay. So thinking that first class, what was it? What did you specifically see that drew you in and made you want to sign up right there?
I think, even as a little kid, I wanted to be strong. I was a big time tomboy, and I was an only child. And so I just spent all my time doing sports with my dad and my stepdad. And so I think it just seemed like perfect, because it was something that was going to help me build strength more as a young adult. And I always just craved, like, how can I be strong? And I think as I got to adulthood, I realized that strength too was more than just like being physically strong.
Right.
But in martial arts sort of had that, mental strength thing going too. So it really appealed to me. for
Nice.
sure. And the goal, because I was definitely goal oriented.
Okay.
So yeah, getting a black belt. I mean, what could be cooler than that?
Nice.
That's what I
Nice.
thought.
So thinking back, what do you remember about maybe your first class or your first couple classes? What are some of the things you remember doing and learning in those first few classes?
I think, I mean, it obviously punching and kicking and blocking. It was a taekwondo and hapkido studio, so
Okay.
we learned both arts from the get go. And so yeah, so a lot of kicking, punching, and blocking. It was back in the was early 90s, so even now, because I own and run a martial arts studio now.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, in comparing what it was like when I first started to what it's like now,
Yep.
it was a little more hardcore then,
Mm-hmm.
like, because it wasn't as mainstream as it is now. And so, we sparred harder. There was a lot of techniques that we had to learn. And I remember it being demanding in terms of endurance. Like, it was hard for me to get through like all the kicking part. I just remember that was the hardest part for me because of endurance. I grew up with exercise-induced asthma, so
Okay.
so that was a little bit tricky for me. Martial arts, by the way, has helped that a lot. My breathing is just so much better now. Yeah, and they also did a lot of tumbling. Like, we would do jump rolls and some gymnastics. And yeah, it was cool. And there were a lot of, so the Grandmaster that was there at the time had his brothers and a couple of other students who were masters. I mean, they already just were like the real deal, just so good. And just to be able to have that experience of watching them and watching them do demonstrations was pretty cool.
Now, what city was this in? I'm just curious because when I lived out there, I actually visited quite a few martial arts schools. So.
It was in Pasadena.
Actually, I visited a Kempo school in Pasadena. I don't think I visited a Taekwondo school. Back in '95, I visited a Larry Tatum's school in Pasadena when I was out there.
Yeah, I mean, I know there was a Kempo studio kind of nearby. It was called back then, I think it was either called Royal Martial Arts is what his studio was called at first, and it was right on the main drag of Colorado in Pasadena.
Okay.
And then he changed it to Chulgin Martial Arts many years later. Can't remember the timeline, but yeah.
What are some things that stand out about that first instructor? What was it about him that made an impact, and just some things you remember?
Well, his name was Myung Kim, and then he went by Chuljin Kim. That was his, like, I guess, I don't know, Korean nickname or something.
Okay.
And he had a very strong presence. Like, he was, it's hard for even me to describe, but a very strong presence. Muscular build, wore a ponytail, just very commanding and impressive to watch. And then he had his brothers and a couple of other students, one of whom I married. Okay. And they were also just great martial artists because he had like 3 or 4 brothers. And so few of them happened to be there at the time that I started training.
At any point back then, did you get involved into the competition side of martial arts? Was that something you ever did or enjoyed?
I did, actually. Okay. I was very competitive by nature.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, we would go to, back then it was karate style tournaments. So it was the point sparring.
Yep.
And with the flags and all. And I really liked that kind of sparring because as somebody who had a problem with endurance, with the point sparring, they stop you every time they see a point to show the points, and so you kind of can catch your breath, and then you go back in again. And I really like that. We've switched to taekwondo Olympic sparring over the years because of that. But I really enjoyed the karate style sparring, and that's how I sparred in my earlier years. And we would go to like Las Vegas had those international, I don't even remember what they were called, but they were pretty fun to go to, and they had so many different divisions, and that was really exciting to me. Okay.
Did you ever compete at the big Long Beach tournament down there?
I never did go to that one, but I did. There's a master named Jun Chung, and he actually, I think Philip Ree trained under him. And he would have tournaments, and we would go to them every year. We would go to those, and that was back when like they would just be in like a college gymnasium with no mats. You would just be sparring on the hard floor, and it was great. I loved it back then because it wasn't nobody haggled. They just took whatever happened. And it changed a lot, I think, when we started doing the taekwondo sparring. And we ran a tournament actually for 15 years
Oh,
too.
wow. Okay.
And I guess my claim to fame would be, in terms of tournaments, would be I did do the U.S. Open one year, and I won that in the adult older division.
Very
so
cool.
That's fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So do you remember your very first tournament, how you did?
Well, I don't know if it was my very first tournament, but I was a brown belt and sparred a second degree black belt, and she clocked me in the jaw with
Wow.
either a roundhouse kick or a back spinning kick, and my jaw wasn't good for a while after that. It would crack and so forth.
Dang.
But yeah, I mean, I learned.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
So did you do just mainly sparring? Did you compete in forms? Did you compete in weapons?
I competed in forms as well. I would always do forms and sparring. And I never competed in weapons. Never learned weapons until we owned our own studio, and then I learned, and then we started doing weapons.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, because I'm also a fellow taekwondo practitioner. What forms did you guys do?
We do taeguk forms.
Okay. Were you doing those back then too, or were you doing the palgwe, or were you doing something else?
Always the taeguk. I think when I first joined, there were some extra forms that we did in the beginning, which I have since forgotten, that I think maybe were palgwe.
Okay. I started taekwondo in 92, and we've been doing palgwe ever since. My instructors, I mean, he's learned the taeguk, but we've never really adopted him into our regular stuff. I'm not a fan of them myself. So
yeah, it's hard to veer from what you have been taught.
Well, I mean, the palgwe, for me, they were way more traditional, because there was the wider, deeper stances, where the taeguk are a little more shorter, a little more modern. I guess you could call them more modern forms, I think. Like you said, it's just what I grew up with and what I used. So, and I started in Tongsudo back in 1984, which was also more traditional forms. And even when I did Shotokan in high school, that was more traditional forms. So I think I was just used to that style. Although American Kempo was very different when I studied that.
Yeah. And I mean, I really enjoy watching the karate forms, because they're so, I don't know, I guess it's the choppiness and the power that they exude.
Yeah.
And I try to do that sometimes with our taekwondo forms.
Nice.
Because it's just, I don't know, it seems cool. And then we also do hapkido forms, which aren't traditional, but my husband and his hapkido master, they made up some forms, and they're much lower. The stances are lower. It's much more circular.
Really?
Because hapkido is circular, right? You're using, those are cool. And it's actually a little bit tricky to go back and forth, because the way you perform them is different, and where you show your power and how you move your body. So
I'd love to see some of those. Those actually, I love seeing different forms that I've never seen. So I'd love to, if you ever have any videos of those, I'd love to check them out sometime, just to see them.
Absolutely.
Cool. So at what belt level did you start teaching, and when did that become something you realized you wanted to do?
Well, that just sort of fell in my lap. It wasn't ever necessarily an intention. I was a teacher by trade, so when I got married at the same time. So actually what happened is, at the studio I was in, one of the masters there was my husband. His name is Jung Lee. And so when we ended up getting married, he opened up a studio, and I was teaching in school, like 5th and 6th grade, in regular traditional school. Okay. So I was a 5th and 6th grade teacher for about 10 years, and simultaneously I was helping run the studio. So I would go and work in the daytime as a school teacher, and then I would work at nighttime at the studio, running it and assisting. And then somewhere along the line, I decided to, actually 10 years from there, so that was probably in 94 until early 2000s, I was mostly just running the back end of the studio and assisting, not doing much teaching, as I recall. And then I decided to quit teaching because it was a lot of work. And then we had 2 kids already. And so I quit teaching and then just started being at the studio full time. That was a huge decision, because I had to trust, because I had a whole income as a teacher. Right. So I had to trust that we could raise a family on just the income of the studio. So that was a big leap of faith. And then we ended up having a 3rd kid. And I started teaching too. So I just gradually started teaching and then teaching more and more. And so it just sort of happened. I didn't even just even having the studio was just sort of landed in our laps because it was just happened to be a studio where the master was going to be, he had to move out of the state, and it just sort of landed in our laps.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah, it was fate.
So thinking back to then, when you first started to now, what do you think has most changed about your teaching style?
I think in the beginning, it was more about just teaching the moves. Here I've learned how, I've been training for probably 10 years at the time when I started teaching myself. And so I'm just trying to impart the skills that I've learned, right? And then, because I'd also been teaching young children and I was a mom for 10 years, so I had learned a lot about kids, of course. And I also always studied just philosophical things, how to be a better person in general. And then it dawned on me that the martial art creed that I had been saying, I don't know if you ever had the martial art creed that went to build true confidence through knowledge in the mind, honesty in the heart, and strength in the body.
No.
That was a taekwondo creed that I think a lot of studios had. And we would have to recite that in class every day. And I think as a teacher, I started then thinking a little more deeply at what I was teaching the kids, besides, not just kids, we had adults too, but besides just the physical aspect of martial arts. And then I really looked at that creed and I wanted to actually help them figure out, how do I take what I've learned in martial arts physically and apply it to life? And so I started, I think the teacher in me, I started adding some of that kind of stuff into our program. Yeah, so it's sort of East meets West. You've got my husband, who is just like somebody you would see in the movies. He lives and breathes, and an old soul who probably in a past life was a samurai warrior or something.
Okay.
And then take my sort of American ways, and it made for a nice, mix. And so, yeah, I put all the words of the creeds up on the belts on the wall, and I make kids at whatever their belt level is, they have to learn their word. And I incorporate a lot of other stuff into our program. So every month we have a different 21-day challenge that helps them become stronger, either mentally, physically, or emotionally.
Very
And
cool.
I think that's mostly how I've changed. It's just as I've grown as a person, I try to infuse that into our studio.
Okay.
I see the big picture now more, I guess, than I did when I was starting. It was just about being strong physically.
Good. And when did the self-defense workshop start? When did that become something that you were passionate about?
That happened around 2014, 15. I just had parents ask me, they said, you should do workshops you should teach self-defense for girls. And these were parents, obviously, who had girls who were entering high school, and they wanted to make sure that they would not be victimized. And they would tell me all these things about, colleges and stuff that would happen in colleges. And to be honest with you, I never watched the news. I was just lived my whole life in this studio and with my kids. And I didn't really think much about what was going on outside of that. And so I had to think about it. They wanted me to do these self-defense seminars, and all I could think about was, because I would look up what self-defense, how to teach a self-defense seminar, and they were mostly surrounded by, just those big padded bully guys, and you would kick, the crap out of them. And although that looked really cool, it wasn't something that I felt like I could teach. Like, that wasn't my personality. And so I thought, well, how would I plus I've been doing martial arts at that time for 20 years. And I thought, how do I teach somebody to be strong when I've been doing that my whole life in a seminar?
Okay.
And so I had to sit on it for a little while. And so I had to think about who I was as a kid, who I was as a teenager. And then I just developed a philosophy. It took me about a year, and I wrote it all down. And so I created a book out of my philosophy. And then from that, I decided, okay, if I'm going to do this, then it would need to, I could do a 2-hour thing, but I really wanted to do like a multi-day seminar so I could give girls the opportunity to work out at least a few times so they could build their confidence a little bit. So now really my goal is to help people build their confidence, because really that's the end game, right? Is you want to be walking taller.
Nice.
And feeling stronger.
So how often do you do the seminars?
Well, right now I've been just doing them in the summer.
Okay.
So like to try to get girls who are about to go off to college.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to now, because our studio is doing better, just life things happen basically. So I wrote the book and then I rewrote it in a physical manner. So first it was a Kindle book and then I made it into an actual book. And then my husband got really sick and he was out for a year.
Oh,
and
wow.
so that he got lymphoma. So in 2019, and the book came out in 2018.
Okay.
So in 2019 he was sick, and then 2020 we had the pandemic, and so and then I had to build up the studio again because it like dwindled down into nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And now things are going really well. So now I'm sort of rekindling Find Your Strength and creating some online courses. And yes, I want to start doing more workshops, and not just for college-bound girls, but
Mm-hmm.
for, younger girls as well. And even maybe boys, like if I can do preteen boys and girls, that would be great too.
I missed that. I used to help my instructor teach the women's self-defense classes, and I loved it, but it was also brutal because he made it realistic for him. It had to be. And I came out with I think I got a black eye once and a bloody nose once, and
yeah.
And he
Exactly.
pulled us aside before, and he's like, if they accidentally hit you, if they miss the target and accidentally hit you and apologize, don't let them get mad at them. They can't feel like this is a class. They have to feel like it's real, so it's serious to them. And it's like, I'm like, okay, yes, sir. And it was fun.
Yeah, I did. It was, I did go. I have a friend that I met who does teach the impact style,
Mm-hmm.
where you're really going hardcore, and the padded. That's not the correct term. I just say the padded bully guys. But they're like the bad guy, right? And they antagonize you. I mean, they really want to get you to feel something,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have to fight them down. And it was a great experience.
Yeah.
For me, and my philosophy and the way that I teach it is a little bit different, because I really want to focus on helping them learn how to use the weapons that they have on their body. So I spend a good chunk of time just teaching them how to punch, how to kick, how to do a palm strike, and then encouraging them to practice over and over again. Because what I've noticed, that even though I do hapkido as well, and I
Mm-hmm.
learn all these complicated maneuvers to maybe take somebody down, it's not really realistic if you're not going to train that way, right? Because you're not going to get muscle memory. So it's much simpler to learn how to punch and kick and practice punching and kicking over and over again and over and over again, because somewhere along the line you're going to start to feel stronger. And that's the important part. And of course, kiopping too, because it helps you learn how to use your voice.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if I look back on my training, what makes me feel strongest is that I've probably kicked and punched, tens of thousands of times.
Yep.
And that's why I feel strong, not because I can do all these other complicated maneuvers, although that's fun too. And so that's what I want them to get, is that you can elbow strike somebody, you can palm strike them in the nose, you can kick them in the groin.
Mm-hmm.
Those aren't things that are that complicated to learn. You just have to practice them so you can feel like empowered by it. And then I do the knowledge piece, and then the piece that teaches them self-worth.
I know when we used to do them, I think he hasn't done them in a long time, just because he got married, he started having kids, and just his schedule, what that's like. His schedule wasn't what it used to be. But back, when we used to do them, I think it was either a 6 or 8 week class, 2 nights a week is how he did it.
Uh-huh.
And he only did like the big padded suit on the final, that was like their final test. So we did, it's kind of like you, we did the same thing. We spent the time, we had them doing push-ups to strengthen their arms. We taught them how to properly punch, how to properly kick. And then their final night of the class was that, I think it was like 15 minutes in the dark room with the pad, with him with the pad. And he wouldn't let any of us black belts wear the padded suit. It was only him, because he didn't want us to possibly get, because he had like his toe broken and stuff from a woman that did a foot stomp as hard as she could. And he's like, don't feel bad. That was wonderful. So, yeah. I mean,
I just really applaud the men who were willing to take that position.
Yeah.
Because, it's doing a really good service.
Now, do you ever, when you do the seminars, have you seen or had any of the women who have gone through your self-defense classes that have then joined your gym to continue their training?
Yeah, I have 2 girls actually right now. They're just about to test for their red stripe belt that started in one of my seminars. So, yeah, and they're doing awesome.
That's cool. That's what I like to see, because, like you said, I mean, I've met so many people. Oh yeah, I took a women's self-defense class, 10 years ago for 2 hours on a Saturday. I'm like, yeah, but what do you remember?
Yeah.
Like literally, if I grab your wrist, what would you do? I mean, if you're not continually doing it and stuff, so.
Now that you say that, there's also, I did one time, it was just for a Girl Scout troop. So it was like a 2-hour mini seminar for a Girl Scout troop. And it actually was a dad who was one of the leaders, which was super sweet to see. And he had his daughters join. Nice. One of them took my bigger seminar. And the other one, I think she was already ready to go to college or something. And the other one, got all the way to Danbo Belt before she moved. So that was sad. She just left for college this year.
Well, hopefully she'll maybe pick it up. I mean, that's one thing. Most college campuses nowadays have some type of martial arts course on campus, I think.
Yeah, that's true.
Whether or not it's a good one, who knows? But hopefully hopefully you had enough of an impact on her that she will want to continue it somehow. So that'd be good.
Yes. Yeah, so, it feels good.
You mentioned your book a few times, and I definitely wanted to get to that. So talk a little bit about that. What's kind of in the book and what it's about. And you said what kind of led to it, but just talk a little bit more about the book, and I will definitely put a link out there for it when the show comes out too. So
okay, super, thanks. It's called Find Your Strength, the Essential Self-Defense Handbook for the College-Bound Woman. And then the byline is The Secret to Being Safe, Strong, and Able to Defend Yourself. And I have 7 keys. That's how it's kind of laid out, is that there's 7 keys that unlock the secret, right? And 3 of them are mental strength, and then there's 2 that are physical strength, and then 2 that are strength in the spirit. And then they all lead up. The idea is that to giving you true confidence, which is just the belief that you have the ability to handle whatever life throws at you, essentially. And that's the goal. And so it starts with, and it's all spells strength. The first key is just basically smart decisions. Smart decisions are based on knowledge, right? So we have to have knowledge in order to, and be willing to use the knowledge that we have. And then key number 2 is take away distractions. So we want to make sure that we're aware of our surroundings and that we're focused. And then key number 3 is realize your weapons and their weaknesses. And I think that one's super big because we don't realize that we have weapons on our body at all times. And so those 3 are based on strengthen the mind. And then the next 2 are exercise your weapons. So it's not enough to just know that you have them, but you have to be willing to use them or practice them so that they will become more automatic. And also this one is really just on exercise in general, right? So that your body feels strong. And then key number 5 is know how to communicate. And so I put this under strength in the body as well too, because you're using your voice and your body. How do you hold your body so that you are exuding confidence? And then the next one is gain respect for yourself and your personal space. So this one's under strength in the spirit. So, and I think this piece to me is the most important, is strength in the spirit, because I think it's the one that we talk about the least. But especially for teenage girls, and I just remember me being a teenage girl, and the hardest part was just feeling worthy, not needing to seek validation outside of yourself. And I think that's what happens to a lot of young girls, is they're seeking validation. And then they get themselves into trouble that way. And so I spend a lot of time on that one. And then trust your instincts is the last one. Yeah. So, and I think the more you find yourself worthy and you have self-love and self-respect, then it's a little bit easier to tap into your intuition. And that's, we talk about our gut instincts all the time and being willing to listen to those instincts.
Mm-hmm. So how has the book been received? I'm reading and it looks like some really good reviews on here on Amazon.
I think it's received well. I mean, pretty much everybody who has read it and gone through my course has given me a lot of positive feedback from it. Cool. Yeah. I haven't marketed it too much with just, in talking about the timeline of after it coming out and then all the stuff that happened after that, I didn't. So now is the time that I'm going to focus on, marketing it.
Okay. Yeah, I might have to order a copy of this for my daughter. I have a 16-year-old daughter, so I mean, she's a junior black belt. I'm hoping she'll go for her adult black belt before she turns 18. We'll see. She loves to read, so it'd be a good one for her.
Awesome.
So what?
Yeah, and any feedback is welcome.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So what is some advice you would, let's say someone approached you, maybe they sent you an email or called you, they're in a different part of the country, they're not anywhere near your school, and they're thinking of getting involved in martial arts for the first time, they know nothing about it, and they just want to know, hey, what should I look for in a school, and what should I look for in an instructor, maybe some things I should avoid? What are some tips you'd give them?
Well, I think I actually wrote a blog on that, so that's kind of funny. I think the first thing is to know why you want to do martial arts, because all the different styles are different. And so like when people come to our studio, if they seem at all like, say they want to grapple, well, we don't do grappling. So you want to think about, why are you going for just like the philosophical side of it? Are you just wanting to learn techniques? Do you want more sparring? Do you want more forms? Because that's different too. Like we're pretty balanced. Some studios are hardcore sparring. Some studios don't spar hardly at all. So I think the first thing is to get a sense of why, and of course the age that you are. And I always tell them to visit different studios, because you want to have a studio where the vibe is, you can tell, like, right, when you're there for a while, you get a certain vibe of the community.
Right.
And so you want it to be the type of community that you want to be part of. And so for us, for example, it's more of a family community, right? And we'll do family events as well.
Okay.
And it's really focused on building confidence. I mean, that is what we're doing. We're teaching them martial arts, but we want them to be more confident. We want them to be good leaders, kind but strong, right? Mm-hmm. Kind to others, but don't take crap, right?
Nice. Yep.
And yeah, don't let yourself get walked all over. But like if I get a vibe from somebody who comes in that they really want something more hardcore, that's more MMA style or if they want to do ground fighting, I'll tell them where else to go. I don't know if that answered the question properly.
No, definitely answered it. So the question then about your school, then you mentioned like family stuff. So is yours a pretty even balance between kids and adults? Do you have focus more on kids, focus more on adults? What is kind of the blend of your student body?
Well, what's interesting, in our earlier days, we had more adults. I mean, a balance. I've always had a lot of kids, but we had more adults. And then we went through a time where we didn't have many adults or teens, and it was mostly kids. And we also moved locations, so that could have been part of it. We were in more of a tougher neighborhood, and even when I started in Pasadena, that had more adults as well. But like times changed a little bit. It was weird. I'm not sure what happened, but it seemed more like maybe because adults got busier. You have the two parents who are working, they're focusing on their kids. Everything's for their kids, not doing things for themselves. And we just had kids, and teens didn't really think of it. But after the pandemic, in the beginning of 2021, because we never really closed. We went on Zoom the day that the pandemic started.
Okay.
And then, because I'm in California, they closed everything down, and then they reopened everything up 3 months later, and then immediately closed everything down after 3 weeks again. Well, we never closed. And so I think we just got known as a place that you could bring your kids. And it was gradual, though. It was gradual. The beginning of 2021, it really started to soar. And I think because people just maybe they realized that they wanted to work on their health. They wanted to build their confidence back up. And because this happened with everybody. So now we have more teens than we've ever had. And we started bringing in adults as well. So that is exciting to me, especially seeing all those teens coming in. So we have a bigger 10 to 15 group than we've probably ever had.
Nice. That's good to hear. That's really good.
So it's pretty balanced.
Okay, cool.
We could still use more adults, but
yeah. Definitely. I think the one thing a lot of adults, they think they're too old. And anytime someone says that, I'm like, my mom joined in her 40s and got her black belt. If she can do it, you can do it. And the whole reason she did it is because she came to watch one of my classes or one of my demonstrations we were doing, and we had a lady named Miss Edith who was 73 and a red belt and testing for her black belt. And my mom joined the next day. So
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love those stories. I love when I go to tournaments too and I see like people in their 70s out there and just doing their form,
Yep. That's
it's
cool.
Awesome.
So now you've primarily been in the taekwondo and hapkido, traditional martial arts, for the last 30 years. So just curious, what are your thoughts on MMA and the UFC? And is that something you're a fan of at all?
Well, I'm not really a fan, to be honest with you. I mean, I can enjoy watching it, I guess. Mm-hmm. I don't watch the UFC stuff. I can't stand watching somebody get pummeled in the face over and over again. I can't watch it.
Yeah.
And I think with MMA in general, and this isn't really fair because I'd have to actually go and talk to people and interview people and make sure this is even accurate. Mm-hmm. But to me, what's most important about martial arts is the philosophy behind it. And so unless an MMA studio is teaching the philosophy and teaching respect and kindness and discipline and the whole shebang, then I think it does a little bit of disservice to martial arts, because then what happens is we get parents who are afraid, or people who are afraid to have their kids trained because they think they're just going to be fighters.
Right.
And I'm trying to tell them that the opposite is going to happen. You know, it seems paradoxical, mm-hmm. but I always say you train to fight so that you don't have to.
Right.
You know, we train to fight and we become stronger and more confident and less likely to even be in a situation where fighting would happen.
One of my former guests said it very well. He said he said they should change the name. It shouldn't be mixed martial arts. It should be mixed martial sport. He said it's not really. And if they started doing that, obviously, or if they started that from the beginning, maybe people would have a different thought on it. A lot of the because a lot of traditionalists I know that aren't fans, that's kind of why, because that art part isn't in there. The philosophies aren't in there. And the other ones, it's a sport, not an art. I'm like, it is. That's right. It's a sport. It's, you know.
Yeah.
And I used to judge MMA. I judged about 1,000 local and regional MMA fights over the years, and I'm a partial fan. I'm not as much of a fan as I used to be. I probably haven't sat and watched a full one in probably almost 10 years now. But yeah, when I look at it as a sport, I enjoy it a lot more. I don't, within the mix of that.
Point.
Yeah, but within the mix, there are a lot of them that do have traditional martial arts backgrounds. And you can tell. I mean, there's, like, when I used to watch local ones, at any given event, we'd have 8 to 12 fights. And I'd see 2 people, actually maybe 2 or 3 total, go in there and like bow to their opponent and, you know, bow before they stepped into the cage and stuff. So you could tell the ones that had their traditional backgrounds. Not as many, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. It's like, not that it's bad necessarily. Just mm-hmm. don't mix it in with what we're doing.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, exactly. All right. So here's kind of a fun one. Who are 3 or 4 names that you would put on your personal Mount Rushmore of martial arts?
Oh my goodness.
And it can be people you know and met and have trained with. It can be just, you know, someone like a lot of people mention, like a Bruce Lee or a Chuck Norris. It's your personal, whoever you want to put up there. I
mean, I guess I would have to put, you know, the 2 people who basically made me who I am first. And the first one would be Chul-Jin Kim, even mm-hmm. though that was so long ago. But he was my master for my first 2 years of training. And then my husband, Jung Yo Lee, who to me is just one of the best martial artists out there.
Nice.
And then, just for fun, the one that I think is the most fun is Jackie Chan.
Nice.
Those are my favorite movies because, mm-hmm. you know, he's usually so funny and tough. So
yep, definitely.
And then I need one more.
You don't have to. Some people, I've had people do as few as 2, and I've had people do as many as 7 or 8. So it's up to you.
I suppose I should have a woman, right? Dang. But I don't. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know. I can't think of anybody.
3's good. All right. Okay. So thinking back over your 30-some years of martial arts training, is there one philosophy you've learned that really just stands out for you? That's it's important. It rises to the top. You keep coming back to it.
Well, it would be the creed that I mentioned earlier.
Nice.
That's what drives me.
Okay. Yeah, and we never had that. We did the 5 tenets of taekwondo, and then we did
we have that too.
And then the tenets of the Hua Ring Do. Those were, you know, we didn't really have a specific creed that we went by, but those were the ones we went through in class all the time. So, and did many push-ups.
Tenets. Yeah. Were they courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, indomitable spirit?
That is correct.
Tenets?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's traditional. We call that martial art creed number 2.
Oh, okay.
Even though it's just a list of words. Okay. So we have the 2 creeds.
And then
those are the words on the belts too. So all the words in both of those are up on the belts.
And then tenets of the Hua Ring Do. Let me see if I can remember those. It was devote yourself and your loyalty to your country, loyalty to your parents, mm-hmm. never yield in the battlefield, love life, do not kill needlessly, and I'm missing one. Dang.
Well, that's pretty
That's
good.
bad. I probably haven't had to recite them since my black belt test in 2006. So it's been a while, but I remembered 4 out of the 5. I'll have to look them up a little later, see which one I missed. But
we started at about the same time, it seems.
Yeah, I initially, a little bit about me. I started martial arts in 84. I started taekwondo in 92. I first tested for my black belt in 96. I had actually came back from California to test for my black belt. I didn't pass. I missed 1 break and I think 2 techniques. And then I had to go back to California like the next day. And then when I moved back here, trying to get back into it to retest and then just basically go through a wedding and then a kid and then another kid. And then fast forward 10 years, I finally retested in 2006 and did my whole test over. So did two complete black belts because after 10 years, I'm like, I can't just do the things I missed. I have to redo the whole thing. And then, finally passed in December 2006. So, yeah.
Wow, good for you for going back and doing it, though.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't easy, but I set the goal. And my instructor said, I'm one of the only ones he remembers that actually said they'd come back and did it. So that kind of meant a lot. So
I have a similar story.
Yeah.
Mine was Danbo belt, the one right before black belt.
Okay.
And I was still in my 20s, mid-20s, so I was a little cocky maybe. And the tests were really long back then. And I had exercise-induced asthma, and by the time I got done with the main part of the test, I was wheezing, and then we had to do the braking. And so, same thing, I didn't brake. And they didn't give me a second chance to go up. Usually they'll give you a second chance. Didn't give me a second chance. And then he failed me. And I was really upset. And I even went and talked to him and I was like, how could you fail me? Like, and in my mind, I was like one of the best students. And I just was like cocky and just thought, but I also had just started dating the master who I am now married to. And he just told me that, I had to set an example and blah, blah, blah. And so I had to retest. And it ended up being a great experience that I'm so glad I had. One, just because I can tell the story about, having perseverance, indomitable spirit, and the fact that sometimes you're going to fail. But then also I went and I said, okay, teach me how to brake. I am never going to have that happen to me again, right? And because obviously there were some technical things maybe I was doing wrong too. And we had to break like 3, sometimes 4 boards, stacked together. I mean, it was pretty hardcore. And so I worked extra hard. I came back with a different mindset and not taking things for granted. And then now breaking is like my favorite thing. It became like, I break bricks and stuff, and I just really like it. And it ended up being a good experience. But, just as easily you can walk away and say, screw you, right?
Yep, definitely.
Right, by having an attitude, but it ended up being a really good experience.
That's cool. I know our instructor, so we usually, for black belt tests, at least though twice I've done it now, we usually have about 10 different breaks, and you only know what one of them is going to be ahead of time. He'll pick them randomly throughout your test. Like if you're I give the example when students are asking me, what should I prepare for? I'm like, well, if you're doing a technique and you do a really great turning side kick, he might have you do 3 boards turning side kick. I said on the flip side, if you do a really bad turning side kick, he'll probably have you do 3 boards turning side kick. So you never know. I said, be prepared for anything. I mean, like my first time in 96, I had to drop a board in midair and snap punch it. I had to do like a sweeping backspin break. The one I missed was actually head break brick. That was the one I missed.
Wow.
And then when I did
you had to do that for tests.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah, exactly. And then that was the one I missed. And then 10 years later, luckily I got it that time, but I had to do, 10 completely different. So I'm one of the few that I know that had to do like 20 different breaks to actually get his black belt. But punching breaks, kicking breaks, and I've never been a huge fan of breaking. I used to like doing forearm bricks just because the first time I ever broke a brick, we were doing a demonstration at a fair. And right before the demonstration, I think I was a purple belt, I believe. He just came up to me and said, Mr. Bryan, you're breaking 3 bricks today with your forearm. I'm like, yes, sir.
What?
I'd never broken a brick in my life. He gave me like a 20-minute lesson on how to do a proper movement and stuff, and I did it at the demonstration. So
oh my gosh, that's so funny.
Yeah,
and again, I have the same experience.
Yeah.
We were asked, and this is when I was still in my original studio. I might have just got my black belt, or maybe I was a brown belt. I'm not sure. And they were doing a demonstration at some fair on a Kia display.
Okay.
And so they said, here, you're going to break 2 bricks. And I had broken bricks before, but they asked me to do a down palm strike, which was new.
Yep.
And so when it was my turn, I would go to break, and I completely missed the bricks and slid my arm down the back side of the bricks. And then, of course, I mean, the adrenaline's pumping. I went for it again, and I broke it, so it was fine. But blood is dripping down my forearm, and I'm just standing there, right? But you just do what you're told to do.
Yeah, that's crazy. I know. I think I've done that once or twice too. Missed them. Like you said, you just keep going. I know when first time I tried doing the head break brick, I mean, not even the first time, because I think he ended up, because like throughout my first test, he'd give me more tries. Because he's like, well, if you do this better, or if you give me 30 push-ups, I'll give you an extra try. I think he wanted me to, because that was the only thing I was missing. He wanted me to pass. But I think I ended up that first time in 96, I tried it 12 times probably, where I basically was just bouncing my head off a brick 12 times.
I'm surprised that that's a testing requirement. That seems like a demonstration thing, but to actually have to break with your head.
Yeah, and I think he might be getting away from it now as much. Yeah. Especially since I think because the Kukkiwan lowered the age of black, because now I think you can get black belt when you're 14. Where back then it was, I think, 16 when we were doing it.
Oh, did they lower? I know it's, 16 in Korean years is 15 in ours.
Okay.
So as long as they're 15 when we apply for it, it'll be a dan instead of a poom.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know if they've lowered it, though. But
I thought they did. I could be wrong, but I thought they did a couple years ago. Yeah. So, and I think that's one reason he kind of got away from that. I mean, and I know when I retested in 2006, I was testing with a kid who was, I think, 17. And he got it on his first try. And my instructor pulls me aside because I was going to go try it. He goes, just remember, he's a 17-year-old kid. He's too dumb to know you shouldn't be smashing your head into a brick. Just go break it. And I got it. And I'm like, oh, that helped.
That's funny.
Yeah. So, yeah. All right. So a few more fun ones to wrap it up. Now, this one, you obviously can't pick your own. Do you have a favorite martial arts book?
I don't think I've read any martial arts books that I can think of. I know. Isn't that weird? I think because I literally feel like I have been living with the textbook for 30 years, I've never been compelled to read, at least not non-fiction martial arts books. Now, I don't know. I've just never gravitated towards reading about martial arts or martial arts stories.
Okay.
Maybe, movies.
Yep. And that one's coming up.
Books.
Okay. Now this one you might not have an answer for either, depending. You kind of grew up in the 80s and 90s like me. Do you have a favorite martial arts video game? I know you said your daughter is.
Oh, all 3 of my kids are nice. Avid gamers. I can't even answer that.
Never played Mortal Kombat or Tekken or Street Fighter back in the day?
Nope.
Wow.
No.
Okay. How about a favorite martial arts TV show?
Well, right now, so my kids just made me watch Arcane, which was, I have to say, great.
Okay.
And that is based loosely, I guess, off of League of Legends. But yeah, tons of all fight scenes. And the animation is amazing. So highly recommend Arcane.
Okay. I'll have to check that one out.
And they also made me watch Demon Slayer, another anime one.
Okay.
And so those 2 are fun. And currently I'm watching Cobra Kai.
Nice.
And so it is quite silly, actually. Have you watched it?
Oh, I love it. Me and my daughter watch it together. Yeah.
So, but don't you just find, it's nostalgic. So, I'm totally having fun with it. I'm in the last season now. Mm-hmm. Aren't you just annoyed with, some of it is just so unrealistic.
I know going in it's not realistic, so I'm just having fun with it. And the whole thing for me is Karate Kid's the reason I got into martial arts. Literally that's the reason I joined. So I was so excited when they announced it, and I've actually, I've had one person from the series on my show, and I'm trying to get some more, and that's
awesome.
Yeah.
I'm super impressed with how they were able to get all those original cast. That's really impressive, and they all look good.
Yeah.
That's impressive too.
Yeah, I know. Ralph Macchio does not look 60. I'm sorry.
No.
I only hope. But I look at other martial artists, like, you talk about female martial artists. If you're a fan of Cynthia Rothrock and watched any of her movies back in the day, she was a guest on my show. She does not look over 60. She's in phenomenal shape, and I'm like, there's no way she's 60 years old. So yeah, it's martial arts, man. That's what it does for you.
Hey, it's a good testimony, right?
That's right.
For staying young.
Definitely.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Now you mentioned Jackie Chan, so I'm curious, favorite martial arts movie?
Actually, the one that made the biggest impact on me, or, where I was like, wow, was The Last Samurai.
Oh, great movie.
I just loved that movie.
Tom Cruise's best movie.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that one, that's on my list of favorite movies for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, but all the like tuxedo, any of the fun Jackie Chan movies, I think that are fun.
Nice. Yeah. All right, now this one doesn't have to be a martial arts movie. It can be, doesn't have to be, but just a favorite movie fight scene.
Ooh.
I've had people pick anything from Star Wars to Marvel to Bruce Lee and anything in between. So whatever you want to pick is up for grabs.
Wow, I'm not sure I can. I'm not super like visual and artistic. Like my kids can say, "Oh, remember the fight scene over here?" And I'm like, "Not really. It all is one big jumbled mess of fighting to me."
Okay.
and I think it's been too long since I've watched so many of the movies that I don't remember. Yeah.
Okay.
So
that's fair.
Would be hard for me to answer.
No worries. All right. Anything else that maybe I didn't ask you or that you want to make sure we mention before I let you go?
I can't think of anything.
Okay, cool. And like I said, I'll put links for your school, for your blog, for your books and everything, on the show notes when we release it. And I just want to thank you. This has been so much fun. I love your story, and I'm hoping next time. I wish I would have known you because I was actually in Los Angeles in February or March. I would have popped by and visited your school, but hopefully next time I'm out that way, I can stop in and because I'd love that's my goal is most of the people who have been on my show, I want to at least meet them in person, and especially the ones who have schools, I want to stop in and say hi and stuff. So
absolutely.
I want to thank you so much. It's been so much fun, and like I said, I love your story, and I can't wait for the episode to come out.
Thank you. Thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it, and it was fun for me too.
Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.